Hello, this is Tracy, and in the last video I explained how probability and drop rates actually work and how what we specifically want when we farm affects our odds of getting those things. Now this is a video about determining drop rates specifically through in-game testing. There are other ways to determine drop rates, including data mining, looking at the game, programming code, and asking Gearbox directly. If I touch upon those, it will be towards the end of the video. The main concept you need to take away from this video, and it's in the title, is margin of error. Understand that and burn it into your brain. This video is about understanding margin of error and applying it to determining drop rates and making comparisons. So, pick it up where I left off last time, and I'm assuming you've seen the other video. Because of the way probability works, because streaks happen all the time, we cannot just farm a boss X number of times, count the number of times they drop a particular item, and proclaim that the drop rate. Okay, remember the die experiment? Sometimes we get results well above the actual drop rate, sometimes well below, and sometimes results mirror the actual drop rate. Over the course of a lot of runs, these streaks even out, and the cumulative observed drop rate approaches the actual drop rate. Okay, this tells us that we can determine the actual drop rate if we farm something enough times and record the results. But how many times is enough? Well, it depends on how accurate an answer we want. And the accuracy of our results, how close what we observe approaches the actual drop rate, depends on three concepts. Okay, sample size, margin of error, and confidence level. Okay, sample size is easy. You do 50 runs, sample size is 50. Do 100, sample size is 100. Confidence level we can set aside for now. Okay, I'll come back to that later on. For those who already understand the concept, we're using a 95% confidence level. Okay, the thing we want to concentrate on is margin of error. Okay, margin of error tells us the level of accuracy of our observed numbers based on sample size and confidence level. Okay, and this is what margin of error looks like for the die experiment. Okay, this blue bar is the margin of error for 50 runs. This means that based on this result, 10%, the actual drop rate could be anywhere along this bar from just over 0 to about 23%. Okay, this is for 100 runs. This is for 150, 200, and so on. Okay, the larger the sample size, the smaller the margin of error. Now notice that the actual drop rate, the red dotted line, falls within the margin of error. But also remember that in this case, we know what the actual drop rate is. Okay, when we farm to find out the drop rate, we don't know that. Okay, so we can calculate margin of error using some complex math, or we can plug our sample size and confidence level into a ready-made form online, which is what I did. Now I'm going to link the website or a couple websites like where you can do this in the description. But just be sure you fully understand the concepts before you start plugging in your own numbers. Okay. And in any case, you don't need to do that because I've already done it. And here are the calculated margins of error for several different sample sizes. Now, when we look at these numbers, that's a lot of farming. Okay, not everyone wants to farm something 500 times, and a lot of people think 50 is a lot. But a couple of things to keep in mind. Okay, one, we don't have to do everything at one sitting. We can farm 30 runs today, 20 tomorrow, 5 the day after, 40 next week, etc. We also don't have to do it all ourselves. We can combine our numbers with other people's data. Okay, content providers do tests all the time and post their results. We can add those to our findings. We can combine our numbers with farming numbers that our friends have generated. Okay, if our farming conditions are consistent, we can combine all these things. Now, consistent farming conditions means all the farming is done at the same difficulty level. Normal versus true Von Hunter mode, and mayhem level. Okay, now there are different opinions on how important this is. It's probably true that for most legendary items, mayhem level doesn't matter. Okay, probably. But I can tell you this. Okay, I've been working on a Westergun video for a while, and I've farmed Private Beans at least 2,000 times, mostly but not exclusively on Mayhem 4. On normal mode, the drop rate for the Westergun is probably in the 20 to 40% range. I can't say for sure, but I can say that more often than not, the gun did not drop. On TVHM Mayhem 1, the drop rate was around 99%. And I say 99% because there have been at least 2 or 3 instances where I can recall where the gun didn't drop. Okay, most of the time it did, but every once in a while, nothing pops. Okay, on TVHM Mayhem 4, I've never had the item not drop. It's pretty much guaranteed. So to be safe, I suggest you make sure all of your data is collected under the same difficulty conditions, okay? What about luck? My understanding is that luck has no effect on legendary drops. It affects non-legendaries and cash. Now, does that include non-legendary uniques like the hunted sniper rifle? I don't know. I don't use luck gear. However, I did early on spec in the Guardian rank luck, and I'm kind of pissed off now that I can't turn it off without completely turning off Guardian rank. So I'm stuck with it like a lot of people. But it's consistent, okay? It's about 8%. I would just say, be aware. If you're going to start keeping track of your drops, I would be consistent about using or not using luck gear, especially if you're looking at non-legendary items, okay? One other thing of note here. Gearbox sometimes changes the drop rates. Okay, a lot of times they'll tell us, like the Farming Frenzy, or when they tell us in patch notes. In those cases, you cannot combine data before and after the change. Okay, that should be common sense. You can do the before and compare it to the after, but you can't put them together. Okay. Additionally, it is likely that Gearbox on occasion tweaks drop rates without telling us. Okay, these are probably minor changes, and they probably make them shortly after releasing new content, or shortly after making larger publicly announced changes. Okay, they track online player behavior. They judge player responses by looking at massive amounts of player data. Okay, it's data mining. And they probably make tweaks if they deem it necessary based on that information. Okay, the main takeaway here is a lot more wiggle room for the numbers with newer content. The Handsome Jackpot DLC has been out for a few months, and we haven't heard much about it of late, and not a lot of people are complaining about it online as far as I can tell. So I assume all of those drop rates have stabilized. But we've also got a new takedown coming and another DLC probably around April. Okay, the first week or two after those drop, I would be careful with recording data. Okay, so that's number one. Any farming data can be combined if collected under the same conditions. Okay, number two, look for observed drop rates well in excess of the margin of error. Anytime the observed drop rate is similar in proportion to the margin of error, we probably need to do more farming. Okay, anytime the observed drop rate is less than the margin of error, we must do more farming because our results are not significant. They don't mean anything. Okay, give an example. An observed drop rate of 34% after 200 runs. Okay, that means you got 68 drops in 200 runs. That's 34%. That means an actual drop rate of between 27% and 41% because our margin of error is about 7%. There's a big difference between 34% and 7%. Okay. On the other hand, if our observed drop rate after 200 runs is 10%, there's very little difference between 10% and 7%. Okay, although it's not zero. Okay. Now this first bar of our die experiment, the lower end is actually below zero. I just chopped it off. Okay. A 10% observed rate with a margin of error of 13.86% doesn't tell us anything useful. Okay. 10% versus 9.8% margin after 100 runs is not much better. So number two, we want a significant difference in size between observed drop rate and margin of error. If you don't get it, keep farming. Okay. Number three, we can use our knowledge of margin of error to do, or at least better understand, comparisons even with potentially small sample sizes. People already do this. They do comparison farming at different difficulty levels, with and without luck, before and after certain events, or before and during certain events. DKarma does a lot of comparison farming, mostly with fairly large sample sizes, 200, 300, 500 or more. Okay, we can do the same thing, so long as we understand margin of error. Okay, if we do 100 runs on normal difficulty and get 10 legendaries, and then we do 100 more on TVHM and get 22, is there a significant difference? Does the drop rate go up on TVHM based on this data? Okay, 10% versus 22%. Well, the margin of error for a sample size of 100 is 9.8%, which means that the actual normal mode drop rate could be as high as 19.8%, and the TVHM rate could be as low as 12.2%. Okay, there's an overlap. The overlap in those two ranges means no, we cannot assume an increase in drop rate between normal and TVHM based on this data. Okay, the actual drop rate for both normal and TVHM could be inside that overlap, and it could be the same. Okay, there could be no change in the drop rate. We're just seeing a streak, a low one and a high one. Okay, now if we do 100 more runs and add the results, now over 200 runs, let's say we get 18 drops total on normal mode and 50 on TVHM. Okay, 9% versus 25%, similar percentages to the only 100 runs. But now the margin of error is 6.93%. Normal mode high end becomes 15.93%. TVHM low end is 18.07%. Is there a difference now? Yes. It's not much, about 3%, but it's a significant difference because there's no overlap. Based on that difference, should you farm TVHM if you want more loot? Yeah. Okay. So, understanding margin of error can allow us to do comparisons and, perhaps more importantly, better understand other people's results. I say that because there are a lot of content providers who do farming videos and drop rate videos, and I have no problem with their data. I hope they continue to do whatever they're doing, okay? Some of them, though, their conclusions are not always accurate because they don't take into consideration margin of error. But if you understand the concept, you can take their data with a grain of salt and understand it better, okay? And that's the gist of the video. Understanding margin of error and applying it to determining drop rates and making comparisons, okay? I'm going to follow up on explaining confidence level and other ways to determine drop rates. If you don't wish to stick around for that, thanks for watching. Give a like or a dislike. Drop me a comment. Constructive criticism is always appreciated. For those sticking around, confidence level. Confidence level is an indicator of how likely we are to get the same results if we repeat an experiment. A standard confidence level for a lot of studies is 95%, and that's the one we've been using. 95% means that if we do an experiment 100 times, we will get the same range of results at least 95 out of those 100 times. Okay. In game terms, let's say we farm a boss 400 times and get a 70% observed drop rate plus or minus 5% margin of error. Okay. That means the actual drop rate is between 12% and 22%. A 95% confidence level means that if we do 400 runs on that boss 100 times, yes, that's 40,000 total, we will see drop rates for each of those 100 times between 12 and 22% for at least 95 of those 100 sessions. Okay. Why is this important? What's with the other 5%? Well, remember, probability has no memory, so streaks are normal. If we do something enough times, the streaks will even out. And in our case, the observed drop rate will equal the actual drop rate. However, if we do something enough times, that also means the probability of longer and more improbable, not impossible, just less probable streaks also goes up. Remember the nickel experiment and the 7 tails in a row. That was after 100 flips. If I instead flipped it 500 or 1,000 times, the odds go up that we'll see a streak of 8, 9, 10 or more nickels, heads or tails in a row, perhaps more than once, okay? That's the 5%. No matter how safe a driver you are, if you get behind the wheel enough times, you will get into an accident, okay? Play enough golf, you'll get a hole-in-one. Live long enough, you'll see stuff that you didn't even believe was possible. It is possible, it's just improbable, okay? Now, we can go for a higher confidence level. There are scientific studies that, by their very nature, demand it. 99% is not uncommon. A 99% confidence level, however, requires a much larger sample size than 95%, okay? The 5% margin of error for 95% confidence level is 385 sample size minimum, okay? For a 99% confidence level with 5% margin of error, that requires a sample size of at least 600, okay? So for our purposes, being 95% confident of a drop rate, it works just fine, okay? Now, as to other ways of determining drop rates, there are at least 3. One is data mining. Data mining is a broad term that sometimes refers to the process of discovering patterns in large data sets. You can Google it and read up on it. I mentioned that Gearbox can look at massive amounts of online player data to see who's doing what, a lot of, and who's not. Okay, that's data mining. Epic can probably do the same, but I'm not sure. And I have no in-depth knowledge of others in the community besides Gearbox or Epic who have access to that type of data, much less any conclusions they've drawn from the data. I don't recall seeing specific determinations of drop rates from data mining posted anywhere, but I don't look at every post, so I'm not going to worry about it. Okay? If any viewers have knowledge of drop rates obtained this way, drop me a comment, preferably with a link. I'd like to learn more. Okay. Number 2, we can also determine drop rates by looking at game programming code. Some people are already starting to investigate the code, at least in a general sense. Now, I don't recall seeing specific mentions of drop rates determined this way yet. If you have, again, let me know in the comment. Number 3, the last thing, the best source of info on drop rates is Gearbox. They, without a doubt, know what the rates are. Okay. Many content providers have contacts with or within Gearbox. Some have used those contacts to, on occasion, confirm certain information about the game. I am not aware, however, of anyone saying they confirmed the drop rate this way. Now, if I'm wrong about that, I'd like to know. Drop me a comment. I'm pretty sure, though, that Gearbox has never publicly stated the drop rate. If you look back at all the official correspondence, the patch notes, all the texts and tweets, you will, to the best of my knowledge, never find an exact number. They'll say they've adjusted or tweaked this rate or that. They'll say they've increased it, but they never say by how much. And they never tell you what the original value was in the first place. And there's a very good reason for that. And that is that Gearbox and any experienced game company, game designer, game engineer in this day and age understands what I said at the beginning of the first video. The vast majority of gamers do not understand how probability actually works. Gearbox knows that if they actually told us that the drop rate for this particular item was 10%, droves of us would run out, farm that boss 30 or 40 times, or even just a handful of times, not get what we wanted, and scream bloody murder. Okay, I have a great deal of sympathy for Gearbox on this point because they have to figure out how to balance things for an audience with unscientific, unrealistic expectations. Okay, even telling us when they tweak or especially raise a drop rate is a double-edged sword because when Gearbox says they raise the rate, a lot of gamers automatically assume stuff they've been struggling to get will now miraculously drop into their laps without much effort. Okay, again, I'm not defending the real issues the game does have, just saying that uninformed players with unrealistic expectations would complain, even if the game were nearly perfect, whatever perfect means. Okay, but that's it. Again, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you got any comments, go to bad. Let me know. Drop me a comment. Criticism is always accepted. Thank you very much.